I always forget. I
Okay.
always forget.
No more silly stuff. Side note, Elaine Hamblin got a haircut.
Looks cute.
Hey, Elaine.
Hello.
Suzanne Wattsman's in the
Oh,
house.
Suzanne. Oh my God.
Private dancers. Ellen Thompson.
See. That's where she
Oh,
goes.
she's feeling so happy. She's already getting her groove on.
Very good.
Tina's here. Okay, taking a break from research. Thank you for joining us today, Tina Limpert. Wait a minute. Are you in like a log cabin or something? Are you? She's like doing some residency in a cool place, I bet.
Who?
Tina Limpert.
Ooh.
Yes.
Leslie Leonard. It's like old home week today.
It's Friday.
I can't hear
There's
you.
France. France is ready for action.
Love
We
your
can't
shirt.
hear you.
Thank you. I dyed it with wastewater flowers yesterday.
Well,
I was trying to look like bacteria. On the bottom, it's more bacteria-y for Alice.
Alice is from near Boston, Mass Art. Yeah,
Yeah.
great.
2021 grad.
Oh, I thought maybe you were a resident of Iceland.
I am now.
Yeah.
Or in the process of becoming one.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Hey, Zarina Lobo.
Hello, hello. I made it. I'm supposed to water the garden before 9 o'clock. I gave up watering the garden today for us.
That's good. Thank you.
oh my goodness. Goodness.
I've got 2 mountains of laundry in my basement I put off thanks to my company just leaving. But more company's on its way tonight. So, hey, Cape Cod, summertime. Everybody wants to visit. Just letting people in. Letting people
All
in.
right.
Hey,
Looking
Julia
good.
Rose. Or hi,
Alice
Oriole
Sowa.
Dancer.
Do we see the same sequence of squares?
Let's see. Okay, so Alice is to my left, you're to my right. Then I have Elaine,
Lane,
Helen,
then
Thompson,
Helen,
Suzanne Wattsman.
Suzanne,
That's row
Tina,
1. Tina's on my
Mick.
left. Mick Wetz, Leslie Leonard,
Leslie,
France,
France,
Oliquin,
Judy, Lisa,
Judy, Lisa, Caroline.
Caroline, Zarina, Julia
Zarina,
Rose.
Julia
Okay, so we
Rose.
see the same
We see
thing.
the same thing. That's cool.
Oh, we never even knew that.
Hey, we didn't get through Amy Harris, Catherine Hardage.
Yeah,
Everybody,
Fabienne.
and
Fabienne
Fabienne
Sowa.
Sowa. That
Is that
is
is
relative.
this your mom?
Yeah.
Bonjour, Fabienne.
Oh,
Beatrice.
wow.
Bonjour.
Cynthia. Is she in San Rafael or is she?
Well, my mom lives up closer to Tahoe now. So she's in the small town of Cool, California.
Cool.
What?
I've been
There's an
there.
actual place called Cool.
Really? You've been there?
Yeah, I'm a Californian. I'm from San Jose.
Oh, right. Of course.
Oh my God. I want to live in Cool. I want to be cool and
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, you
That's
already
like
live
this-
in Cool.
I mean, it's not that cool temperature wise there right now, but
Oh.
yeah.
It's like a play on words a little bit.
Very good. All right.
All right.
It's 9:04, Amy. Let's get started.
You think?
I think so.
Okay.
You're gonna count us in. Suzanne, are you ready? Suzanne's ready. Suzanne, what's on your hand?
Okay. Is everybody, let's see. Also, there's people just still coming in, Kathy.
Oh, they are.
what can
Here,
I
I'll
say?
let them in.
And make sure people are muted. Mute yourself.
Yes, please. Mute.
Oh my God. Will you look at Suzanne already?
She's ready. She's just doing the warm up.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Share sound.
Well, it's the end of the week. Now, where you been? Well, now it's Feedback Friday, so come on in. come sit down and stare at your screen. We got a presenter that you never seen. We're Feedback Friday, we're on the loose. We'll be the train, you be the caboose. It's Feedback Friday with Kathy and Amy. Mashed potatoes and the gravy. It's Feedback Friday all day long. Feedback, feedback, Feedback Friday.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. It is Feedback Friday, episode 126. Welcome to Feedback Friday. This is our show where we speak to artists, dyers, historians, activists, scientists, writers. Oh my God, who do we not speak about to? Adventurers and people who are interested in the things that we're interested in, which is natural dyes and textiles. We love color and we love fabric, cloth, yarn, and felt. We love it all. And we're so happy to have people to join us on Fridays to talk about our favorite subjects. I'm Kathy Hattori, president of Botanical Colors, and joining me from Cape Cod in her freshly eco-printed from wastewater flower blossom shirt is Amy Dufault, our director of communications and eco-printing. Today, sorry, I have a little bit of a frog in my throat. Today, we are so pleased to welcome Alice Sowa, who's going to speak to us about bacteria dyeing in Iceland. So Alice is working with Fjólublár, Living Purple, and it's a collaborative ongoing research project between the Icelandic Textile Center, which sounds fun all in itself, and the research lab BioPol on creating a sustainable dyeing process for Icelandic wool using the purple dye produced by the bacteria Janthinobacteruim lividum. Or there we go. Yeah, Alice gave me the thumbs up. That's a lot of syllables. Anyway, it makes this incredible color. Alice is going to tell us all about it. We've been watching Alice on Instagram, and we're very interested in what she's up to and the way that her mind is working as she's in this new environment with a new bacteria that makes a different color. I'm going to go through a couple of reminders and some housekeeping, and then we're going to turn it over to Alice to do her thing. Just to let you know, we have a couple of online workshops that are live on our site. The first one is with Natalie Stopka. So Natalie's been a Feedback Friday presenter. She's brilliantly funny and so well informed about pigments. And she's going to be showing us how we can forage for our own invasives or introduced species and create color from those. And so that's going to be a really interesting online program with her. Also, our own Cara Marie Piazza, who we've just dubbed the Queen of Cool, is doing an online ice dyeing workshop. And if you have purchased our beginner dye kit, all of the stuff you need in there, except for a few fresh flowers, is included in this kit. So this kit has all the ingredients that you would need in order to take this workshop with Cara. And if you're an accomplished dyer and you've done natural dyeing for a while, you probably have all the ingredients as well. So please check it out, and we'll send you the materials list, and you can join and have a great time with Cara. We've got some liquid dyes on sale, and also our madder and our lac extract powders on sale. And then we still have a few of those beautiful handmade fans from Japan that were part of the online, artist in residency with Takayuki Ishii, and his wife Tomo Ishii came and stayed in Seattle for a month, and we had so much to learn from them. They brought amazing things, and we were able to get some of these fans in order to offer them to you. So if you've ever wanted a handmade fan by somebody you know, please check them out. Amy's going to be our moderator for and also handle the chat for this call. So we'll have everybody muted during Alice's presentation, and then afterward, you can enter your questions in chat for Alice. Amy will moderate that, and then at the end, we'll open it up for everyone to say hello and just kind of greet each other and say thank you to Alice. And then, of course, this call is being recorded, so you will have access to the recording sometime after our presentation. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Alice. Alice, welcome to Feedback Friday. We're so pleased to have you, and we can't wait to hear what you're going to tell us about.
Thank you. It's so cool to be on the other side. Usually I'd be pulling up a project to start knitting. So I'm going to share my screen. We good? All right, see the thumbs up. I'm just going to minimize so it's on the way. Welcome again, you guys, all to this week's Feedback Friday, where I'm going to be sharing my journey of bacteria dyeing. Ooh. Next slide. Oh, there we go. A little bit about me. Oh, go back one. I am a Bay Area raised creative that went over to the East Coast to study industrial design at Massachusetts College of Art and Design. I then have financially stayed working in the product design world, but on my own side, creative side, I love weaving, any form of textiles, big ceramics person as well, but just with accessibility to resources, have been just having fun with what's successful with like natural dyes, yarn cycling, I like to call, with just using yarn scraps and just making fun, cozy textures with whatever resources I come across. Last year at this time, I came across this program called Fab Academy. That is what brought me over to Iceland last September to participate in. And it's this 6-month program where the first 3 months were where I did a deep dive into different textile related things, from e-textiles, embedding like wearables and stuff like that, to biomaterials, to like designing on the computer, to then like 3D print or do more computational based things. And then the second 3 months was where I did a deep dive into reevaluating the ceramic slip casting process and using biomaterials and all awesome stuff like that. But it was during this program where I learned about bacteria dyeing and instantly was just like amazed and wanted to learn more, and kind of led me to staying here longer in Iceland to research about it. So before I talk about my work, I just wanted to call out some awesome pioneers in the bacteria dyeing world that really helped make it be what it is now, especially with its accessibility and awesome research. The whole like notion of bacteria being pigmented kind of started popping up in research papers back in the 80s, but the connection of dyeing with textiles didn't really kind of come about until like 2010, 2011 with Faber Futures founder Natsia Audrey, where she was working in a lab and was like, let's see if we put these two together. And she kind of like started the momentum that lots of different research labs over the world have taken on. And co-founder of Fab Academy, Cecilia Rapzi, made this amazing open source platform for bacteria dyeing called BioShade. So if you're looking to get into it and learn more about it, highly recommend checking out this resource. And here's a really cool example where she overdyed a piece with 2 different types of bacteria, one that's purple and one that was pink. She's had this scarf for like 7 years or so, and she says that it's only the pink that's really started to fade, where the purple's going on pretty strong. And then Living Color is with 2 Fab Academy alumni as well, who focus their bacteria dye research on how sound can affect how bacteria grow, specifically in the patterns they make. And from that, they then did collaborations with Kapuma, some like more bio ink stuff, and recently how to use bacteria dyeing on leather, which is really awesome, epic. They're based in the Netherlands. And then Colorifix is on the more industrial side, which is really exciting to see, as all of these other groups are more like small batch artisanal practice, and Colorifix focuses on how we can have it be something that's adaptable to a current dyeing process. So they use actually a genetically modified bacteria, where they can take a genome code happening anywhere in nature, embedded in their bacteria, and then have a color change from that. that was a very general summary of that really complicated process, but super cool how they're able to scale it from like big rolls of fabric to like cone dyeing. And what all of these guys have also been researching is that it's not just on natural fibers that this dyeing is happening with bacteria, but also on synthetics and furs and things like that, with no need for pre-mordanting, which is the wild part of bacteria dyeing, and uses a lot less water. Like you only need enough water for sterilizing your workspace, because it's the bacteria itself that grows on it that dyes, minus how Color Fix works, but I'll let you guys dive into their company on your own. But it's overall a lot more sustainable method with resource-wise, is the point I'm trying to get across. So these are kind of like the 3 main pigmented bacteria that are pretty accessible for labs or universities to get their hands on. I personally worked with Janthinobacteruim lividum since November to now, and you can see my mouse, great. So you might see here how there's different like biosafety levels. So Aricia is one of the exceptions that has a level 1 and 2, and these levels dictate the safety it is for us to work with these bacteria. So level 1 means you pose more of a harm to contaminating the bacteria than it does to infecting you. Level 2 and up, you need to work in a very like secure sort of lab scenario where you're not likely to get sick from it. So like Serratia level 2 would be that it would want to kind of contaminate you in a way. So look for level 1 if you're looking for any of these bacteria to work with, is all I gotta say. And these bacteria are really cool in that they're mostly soil dwelling, except for Serratia was more of like a mold. So if you've ever seen like red mold in your bathroom or something like that, it's probably this bacteria. And then I'm making it shortened, but J. lividum, the one that I've been working with, can also be found in the back of frogs and has a great like relationship with having antimicrobial properties with it. And also the textiles that are dyed with bacteria do get these antimicrobial, antibiotic, and antifungal, like really cool properties on top of it all. So yeah, and then here are the chemical compositions of them for if there's any biochemists who want to nerd out on that, because I don't have that much of a background in that too. I just appreciate the patterns they make. So overall, here's a general process of what it goes about, like creating your like new home for cultivating new bacteria. So you have what's called like a fresh nutrient agar dish, and in that the agar is a seaweed-based nutrient that you can then plate or inoculate bacteria onto. And you want to work in a very sterile environment so that you don't have other bacteria to come feed on this. You just want your pigmented bacteria to grow here. You let it grow for a few days, and then you prepare your textile, which you then prepare another like nutrient to pour over it that you then transfer your bacteria onto to have it grow and die. And the dye of the bacteria comes from, in very general terms, the poop of the bacteria, if you will. It's kind of excretes it, and just what builds up inside the cells as they grow. And that's what embeds itself into the fiber. And then once it's done its full growth, you sterilize it, and then you're left with either like a shibori dyed, a fully dyed, or however pattern dyed textile with how you put it in your dish. So this is what I call like petri dish dyeing. There's also more like liquid dyeing that I'll get into later. Here's just a little bit of a visual. Here I'm pouring a new agar dish. Those are like the parent plates. This is just an example of some of the broth. Inoculating a new agar dish, and then that's just going to be on repeat. So here, you might think like, okay, yeah, that's cool working with bacteria, but don't you need like a really nice lab or something to work in? No, you don't, which is really cool about working with definitely level 1, anything you can do here in a wet lab scenario. And that's where you just need a pressure cooker and a camper stove, and then a few other like petri dishes, bottles, inoculation loop, and you're pretty much set to work in like a classroom setting, back of a van, a tent, something where there's not much wind blowing around, but you don't have to work in like a standard lab environment, which is really nice and makes it a lot more accessible to do this. People though who are, what's the word? Like very immune sensitive, even with proper PPE and stuff like that, wouldn't recommend working with bacteria, but otherwise with just like proper face protection and things like that, it's really easy to work because you just got alcohol to help sanitize. And so here in this image, you have your parent dishes, you have some yummy nutrient broth prepared for the bacteria to grow in, some sterilized dishes that came out of our version of an autoclave, which is just a pressure cooker. And then to be able to work in this sort of exposed environment, you use a camper stove that creates a nice like sanitary bubble where anything within about a 10-inch radius of that flame is going to be like burned off. So it makes it nice and clean, in quotes, for you to be able to work with these really sensitive microbial beings. And so here you see me pouring some nutrient broth over a silk shibori folded piece that I put in this dish. And this was sanitized in the pressure cooker inside the dish beforehand to make sure that it was fully clean. There's no other little guys that will feed off of the nutrient broth. And then here, there's a glare on the top of the dish, but this one's full of like the parent J. lividum that I'm then transferring with an inoculation loop that you can see I'm like dotting onto the fabric in there. So this was day 0. So after that last photo, this is what it looked like, where I had blotched on a bit of the J. lividum over, and then also in whatever remaining broth was around it. And then on day 5, it already grew to be this much. So temperature is a big factor when it comes to J. lividum, in that too hot, it can kill it, too cold, it makes it very slow for it to grow. So this was before we had a proper incubator at the Icelandic Textile Center for us to put it in. So we were kind of putting it just like in a warm room at like trying to keep it around 24, no more than 26 degrees Celsius. I've gotten better at Celsius now, so I don't know how to convert that to Fahrenheit, but that's about like the temperature range that is nice and cozy for this guy to grow. And you might be wondering, like, why is there a white spot here? But that happens to be where the lid of the Petri dish is touching the fabric. So there's no oxygen for this organism to be able to grow. And it being a living organism, it needs oxygen just like us. So with this full like background, oh, and I forgot to show that this is like the unfolding of the shibori piece I had in the dish, and it's similar to just any other natural dyeing process where if it's super tightly folded, you're gonna get no dye in those areas, and the broth didn't happen to go into the folds, that means the bacteria is not gonna go in there as well, as the bacteria goes where the food is. Kind of like me, whenever I'm really hungry, I just follow the food. So with that awesome like introduction to bacteria dyeing, I then was able to join the team doing the research for Fjólublár, or Living Purple, which has been like a really awesome collaborative project between the Icelandic Textile Center and research lab BioPol up in the northwest of Iceland, where we've been focusing on cultivating and creating a sustainable dye for Icelandic wool with the purple dye, and that purple dye is called biolusin. Each pigmented bacteria has a different type of pigment it produces, and the one J. lividum creates is called biolusin. And these past 4 months, we've done like a deep dive into what's I'm calling our first phase of this research. So the first part was BioPol focusing on cultivating the bacteria and looking into different food sources. And then I was at the Icelandic Textile Center looking into how to dye with it, with the bacteria that they, or the pigment they extracted from the bacteria at BioPol. So here's just a brief overview of like an example of what they were looking into, and that was different food sources for the bacteria to grow in. And mostly research labs have like their formula for like the nutrient they work with, but we were looking at different waste stream systems in Iceland from like the fish industry, the wood industry, which yes, we do have trees here to get wood from, and all the different properties that can come from that to help the bacteria grow. Unfortunately, our control was better at having a more saturated pigmentation evolve from it. So the waste stream systems we currently looked at weren't as reliable for like strong pigment to work with. But they also use like a bioreactor and other sort of recipes to cultivate and let me then play with it. So I looked into dish dyeing, as we had a wet lab I could work in, and liquid dyeing. So dish dyeing here, I worked with some felted pieces and some loose wool pieces. And this was the final plates that I had done at the beginning of July. So literally like a month ago, which is crazy to think that that was already a month ago. But since I'm working with the living organism, there's going to be some plates, even if it's from the same parent plate, that want to grow like these lovely guys, or just not work at all. Back in the beginning of June, when I first started working with the plates that had been left over from May, there was like not much success with, like the plates were looking all like 5, 6, and 3, like no pigment at all. Even like the little spots of where I inoculated were just not going anywhere. And there's some theories as to like, oh, maybe the bacteria just were not the right temperature or whatnot. And my theory is that they were just a bit too old, and that bacteria do have like a lifespan similar to humans where they reach menopause at one point and then they stop cultivating. So those bacteria had definitely reached their point where they were not going to be reproducing anymore. So luckily this parent plate that I got for these ones gave us some awesome plates, or awesome pigment to work with. So here's an example of those dishes back there on day 0. These two looked like this after I had inoculated them. And then on day 3, like just 3 days is usually the minimum they need. But like, for example, dish 3 over here was like this on day 6, but then on day 9 was like this intense dark purple. And what's interesting to notice across these all is that dish 2 over here, you can tell that it's soaked up all of that broth medium to then make it be that the bacteria kind of had to work its way through this felted piece in order to then like make the dye and everything like that. But then here with dish number 7, I'm using loose wool, which is just not felted, and it was a lot more saturated, and the bacteria was also in the broth medium, so the whole piece of wool really got nice and purple. And it's the same thing that happened here with dish number 3. So here's like a bit of an overview of all the dish dyeing tests that I did. I thought that this was like a nice recap of that loose wool from the last slide is here. The one that absorbed all the broth is in this one. And then the one that was day 9 that finally got purple was in this one. The reason why this one's a little bit grayer though is that I let it sit in the dish for a few days after it had turned purple, rather than sanitizing it that same day that I saw it turn purple. And I think, I don't know all the scientific reasoning behind it, but my theory is that it just aged or started to decompose in some sort that caused the color to start to fade, unlike this bright purple here. And then these ones on the bottom are just examples of dishes that you can see where I had inoculated it with like the parent bacteria, but they just didn't grow anywhere else. And also this wool just got stained from the nutrient broth at the same time too. So really cool working with dish dyeing. And then liquid dyeing. So we had 2 different types of liquid dye that I was experimenting with. One was honestly just an accident working with the waste medium that BioPol gave me from their bioreactor. And then the other one was an extraction medium that you use to break open the cells even more to get even more pigment out of it. So this one was the happy accident that my first test was based off of. I was like, all right, let me take like 2 grams of wool. Let's see what happens when I then put it in the pot with some waste medium on low heat, let it sit there for an hour, and I came back and it had absorbed pretty much all of the pigment from that waste medium, and then rinsed clear, which I was the most surprised about, that there was no dye that came out of rinsing it. And has held its color pretty well since then. And yeah, I think I've left it loose. I didn't card or spin it after. So that was like, all right, cool. Day one, we got the project under wraps already. It's like, no, that was just an awesome, exciting starting point that was then opened up a lot of things that we then had to look into after. So I looked at ratios, doing like 2, 5, 10 grams of like weight of fiber for the same amount of dye material, and just seeing how, if we could get different shades, if it would be the same, but clearly we got different saturations. And then like reusing dye baths. So starting with the proper ratio, what I thought was the proper ratio for this waste medium, but then doing another 10 grams, and then finally exhausting the dye bath with the final, 50 grams later. So because it was a waste medium, there was really no way of fully knowing the saturation or what the exact ratio had to be. I realized with all the tests I was doing, and same with the extraction medium, there was no real way that we had the resource of knowing the proper saturation of that as well. There are like samples you can get where you can measure like the wavelength and all that sort of more sciencey thing that Jens, our researcher at BioPol, was able to explain pretty well, but we just didn't have the funding for it for this research right now. So here's a bit of just an overview of like the liquid dyeing I did of loose wool. I did try some tests of shifting the color with like baking soda and stuff like that. There wasn't really any reaction at all, at least with what I was giving. Jens over at BioPol played around with some things, and he, with one test, got like this super dark teal that then overnight shifted to peach. And then when I finally got the liquid to dye with, when I put it on heat with a low heat with the wool, there was no color anymore that came from it. So it's a very sensitive sort of liquid that we were working with, but the purple ended up being the most successful with what it could dye with. And then I did do a UV test. I have no idea if this will translate well to your computers, as it's really hard to see on my screen, but we had some really super sunny days here around the solstice and it not getting dark at all. We were able to do a nice UV test just outside. So this bottom section here hopefully looks a bit grayer or like less, like more muted than the top section. So it is a bit sensitive to light, and something that I'm looking forward to testing out with like the next round of this research is if using like iron like you do with logwood, if that would help with light fastness or anything like that. So something to keep trying out. And this was wool that I had dyed as loose wool, then carded, and then hand spun to put on these little cards here. So I also had the chance to work with some local plant dyes, and then overdying and space dyeing with the bacteria dye. So for these pieces here, or these tests here, I did pre-mordant them as I was using a plant dye first. And for these ones, I use alum potassium sulfate, and then some other tests I did alum triformate that aren't shown here, but the plants I used were, of course, the lupins, as they're everywhere here in Iceland. I happened to have gotten a green from the bath I did, but you can get anywhere from like a teal to a neon yellow with just the flowers in addition to this green. And then the leaf, I got more of like this, it looks a bit more mustardy on the screen, but it was more yellowy. And then from the rhubarb root, this nice like almost pumpkin orange. And then here I did the plant dye first, and then the space dyed with the bacteria. This was with the extraction medium, so it's a little bit lighter than with the waste medium. And then here I took the plant dyed ones and over dyed it with the bacteria. In my brain, I was like, all right, I know color theory doesn't really work with natural dyes necessarily. So I was like, how's green with purple gonna go? But I was like, oh wait, no, this is more like a blue tone of a purple. So I was able to get a more like muted teal, a khaki green, and this sort of like grayish beige color from overdying the first plant dyed tests, which I personally find are a really nice earthy palette overall together. And then with some felted pieces, had fun doing some like resist kind of dyeing, where these were also pre-mordanted and then dyed in their respected plant baths. These are just like little laser cut circles. I used clothespins to secure, and then over dyed them in bacteria bath, where you can kind of see the circles. Here, I think these remained more white because I didn't re-soak the wool for long enough before dyeing in the bacteria, but you can see the undercolor of the plant dye coming through, which I think is really pretty. Especially, I love the lupin and the bacteria together. It's one of my new favorite colors. And then just a final image of the plant dye and bacteria dye. And we're kind of, this is where we're at right now with the research, as we're just wrapping up what these first 4 months have been and what's going to become a booklet. I'm still working on my pages that we're putting together, as all the bacteria related research that we've done has been open source. We're planning on having our research be open source as well. I'll share the link with Amy to add to the recording once I know where that link is. But overall, Fjólublár, Living Purple wouldn't have been possible without the funding from the organization up in the northwest of Iceland that supports regional like innovation and stuff like that. In addition to like this awesome team, Margaret, the project manager and project manager at the Textile Center, Jens, the head researcher from BioPol, and his intern Franziska, and then Eastex for providing the wool for us to work with. And if you had any questions that we're not going to be able to get to today, or want to get in touch, here's my information. So yeah, ready for the questions, Amy?
I got my own questions, but Kathy, do you have any questions?
I'm kind of speechless. It's so amazing to see it. And I really love the over dyes. Those were incredible. And
Yeah,
it also, just a comment on the fastness. Seems like it's pretty, pretty good. So
yeah.
there's so many things that could be very interesting. I just had a quick question. When you talk about the like these are these bacteria, how do they categorize them? Like we were talking about using specific PPE with specific ones where you need to take many more precautions versus the ones that are much more easily available to use. What's the framework of how they analyze them? What are they analyzing them for? Harm, I guess.
So you mean by like categorizing for being able to dye with, or categorizing for like safety wise?
Safety
wise, I would say it's just something that they research and understand like in the lab scenario, and hopefully first in the lab scenario for like making sure nobody else gets sick from them. I should have put in this chart where they had a great sort of ladder system that dictated what causes it to be a certain level. I can share it with you, but after, but there are certain like qualities of the bacteria that either makes it be that it's more susceptible to contamination, or it's more likely to look for host to then be in.
Okay. Great.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Amy, it's all yours.
Okay.
You're the host
thanks.
now.
Thank you. Hey, Alice, how do you get the mold or the medium?
Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that. So our samples of J. lividum came over. No, it's okay. I mean, it's kind of considered a mold in some cases. We got ours when Louise Mascria, she came over to be our instructor for Fab Academy, and she brought it over. This bacteria had been first in Amsterdam at the Fab Lab, the WAG Institute they have there, where Cecilia had been cultivating them. So that's where our strain comes from. But it happens to be a strain that's also just been traveling around the world for other people to work with. But it's originally from the back of a frog.
Oh my God. So you get that bacteria from the back of the frog, and then you're able to just grow it from there. So you just get the initial.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, if you're looking for some in soil, there is a process where you can go through the soil and separate the different bacteria to then be like, ah, yes, okay, I know that this is one that creates pigment. We're going to separate that from all the other ones to then cultivate to use. So there are ways where you can look at your local soil systems and be like, all right, that's already identified as a pigmented bacteria. However, there's so many that we don't know out there that you might come across a new one, for example. It's a bit of a tedious process that in a wet lab scenario you wouldn't be able to work in and do that, but in like a proper laboratory with a microbiologist, you could probably do it with.
Let's see, another question I had. How do you create a bacteria dye bath? I see like you have those kind of vials of the concentrated bacteria. Are you just adding those kind of like a vial of it then into
so
water?
From the dish, you can kind of scoop it off and put it in those tubes and use different solvents to like shake it up to break open the cells. I was like, I'm practicing making martinis for when I'm back home visiting my mom. Like that's what I felt like I was doing all the time, because you want to break open the cells that then makes that like nice, the extracted medium one be nice and saturated.
Like that your mom's laughing at you or maybe with you. Let's see. Faith was asking, what does extraction medium mean?
It can be anything that helps open up the cells. We were primarily just working with alcohol, but there's some that are a bit more toxic and a bit more user-friendly. So I was using the more user-friendly one in a wet lab scenario. And there's also, I forgot to mention, someone at Central St. Martin's who's been incorporating it into like a printing paste and using it for screen printing. So it is able to be incorporated into other mediums as well.
Yeah, I think you sent me a link for that one time. It was really cool.
Yeah.
Let's see. Disappeared. How did it come? I like Suzanne. How did it come to be that someone figured out why a frog?
I'm guessing the researcher was probably like, oh, that makes a pigment. Or when they're like scooping off testing what's on the back of a frog, someone saw like, oh, there's a pigmented bacteria coming from there. Let's see. Then later on, another person was like, oh, with a textile mindset, what if we use that pigment for textiles? That's how like scientists, they come across a lot of things that can then be used for textiles, but they don't really make that connection because they're really focused in their domain of research. So that's why it helps having this like collaboration with scientists, designers, artists, just to really get all different perspectives on how our resources can be used.
And so is that how you got the funding for this, with that kind of idea in mind, that you're going to help scientists to talk about it in a number of ways?
Yeah, I would say so. We were definitely looking at like the collaboration aspect of it, as this is the first time the Textile Center and BioPol have worked together on something, and it's definitely something that's really excited for moving forward for other research as well.
That's really cool. Natural dyes strike again, being able to tell such a cool story. Hey, all right. Do the bacteria damage the cloth at all?
Not that I'm aware of. If anything, it has higher properties, adds higher properties to it, to being like antifungal, antibacterial, and antimicrobial. And I did do a test in that like loose wool liquid dye test, where I even put it like through a pressure cooker, the dye like waste medium and the extracted medium with the wool in it, to see like what happens if it gets to like a boiling temperature. And there was no fade of the color. If anything, it almost binded to the fiber more so. And that's what they do at Color Fix, where it goes through like those industrial like dye machines where there's like high pressure to get the dye to go through the fiber. So I was seeing on like smaller scale if that would affect the fiber of the dye in any way, and I didn't notice any difference.
Wow, that's exciting.
Yeah.
Let's see. Where does the waste medium come from?
The waste medium came from the BioPol, the research lab we were working with. And it was from like their excess of them cultivating the bacteria, whether it was from their bioreactor or just like their other liquid tests that they were doing. They kind of just collected them all in bottles for me to work with, because it was purple. So they're like, oh, maybe it's something you can do something with. So it was just more fun for me. It's nothing that was super reliable, but it did offer results in a way that couldn't be reliable with more research.
No, I know when we talked this past week that because you're in the midst of the research, you can't talk about everything that you're doing.
Yeah.
But when you're kind of thinking about how this is all going to roll out, do you have some ideas of how you see it kind of being applied maybe to the like fashion and textile industry?
I've personally, outside of the research, just was curious about what the market looked like. And I foresee it being more so, I would like to have it be more accessible for like artisanal practice, as there's already a lot of investment in other companies going for more industrial practices, but to have it be, because like right now you buy like a right bottle for chemical dyeing, for example. So like adding to be like, why not have it be a bacteria dye that you use instead is kind of what I'm looking at.
Oh, so Pamela says, so then the waste medium is not replicable.
To a certain extent, or like reliably not replicable.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, and I understand why you would want it to be replicable in terms of research, but it's also interesting to not have something that's the same too, I guess. Kind of various
Personally, yeah.
views of it, how you had it, like that picture you had with all the different colors of the circles,
Mhm.
kind of all complement each other.
Yeah.
Julia Rose, has anyone tried to make ink yet?
Yes. If you look up the Vienna Textile Lab, those researchers with Living Color, they partnered to make something called BioInk, which is and then some other, either based in Austria. There's so many different researchers all over the world. Like I know there's also some researchers in Concordia and Montreal that are doing stuff. But so yes, to answer your question, yes, people have been looking at inks.
And okay, looks like that's the end of the questions, and that's the end of my questions too, unless anybody else has any more questions for Alice. I mean, it's so interesting what you're doing. I love it when, it's like you're taking this thing that is waste and you're making it into a color and really pushing it. So, and I love that you have all these different partners. I love that you're working with science as well, around like working with a scientist, because they're doing brilliant work and they don't know how to talk about it. And natural dyes are so great at being able to make people come a little bit closer to understand what the science is. So, and I know there's definitely people who are on here right now who are doing some incredible research on their own. That's really hard to talk about, but get to know a scientist. Oh, Helen is asking, any idea about when this could be scaled up for production? Yeek.
For us,
Yeah, maybe that's you're working towards.
I personally want, because I had a chance to visit the East Tech Spinnery down in near Reykjavik, and it was really cool to see how they do like giant, like 300 kilos of wool like dyeing at a time, and then they had like these little sample ones where it's like 3 kilos at a time, cone dyeing and loose wool. So I'm like, all right, could we like try sticking some of our bacteria dye in at least your sample ones? Like, I think that would be really cool to see, because technically it has been already scaled up with Color Fix and then another company in France called Pili, like Pili, and then probably some other ones. I feel like there's a new one popping up every day when I'm reading more about it. So for us, I say we're more so just still in the research phase, but I would love for it to scale in some way.
Mm-hmm. And we'll, again, I always put the links you gave me so many links and I did put it in the chat. So you can go back to the chat for some of the people that Alice is talking about, but we'll also have it in the recording. So you can see some of the people she's partnered with. Now, a couple of questions did just come in. Okay. So does the color change over time, and how much time?
I've noticed a little bit more so when I keep it by a window, like with any natural dyes. Some have shifted to be a little bit more blue. And I am just using tap water all the time too, as we have really nice tap water here in Iceland. I don't have to worry about using distilled water. But it's mostly been like the extraction medium that has been what shifts more than the waste medium, interesting enough. Yeah.
Are there
Can I
colors?
ask a question, Amy?
Yes, yes, Kathy, jump in.
Hey, Alice. Have other than the red that came from the Serratia, are there other is there another spectrum out there, or can you grow a different spectrum from the same bacteria?
Yeah, wait, let me find the article real quick. Because you can get greens, yellows, a whole range of different colors from different bacteria. Let me just pull it up super quick. I think it's this one. Nope, not that one. Other link. Here we go. This is a really great article explaining like the different spectrum and kind of like how J. lividum happens to be violacin. There's other ones that have different words for it as well that I just butchered the pronunciation of, so I'm not going to try.
Okay, that's great, because it's so interesting to me that blue and purple, which on the natural dye spectrum are the most difficult to obtain,
Yeah.
are the ones that you're like
Mhm.
working with, and you've got 2 examples of them
Yeah.
that are available to you. And I'm thinking, wow, this is so interesting.
Yeah, and that's actually a big part of why we use J. lividum, is that there's not many natural dye resources here in Iceland, specifically nothing for blue that's naturally occurring. So that's why we really, and purple. So that's why we really looked at pushing for using this for this research.
Super, super interesting.
Okay, this is a great question. And okay, here it is. This is a far-fetched thought, but is it like local cheese where the environment creates terroir?
Ooh.
Ooh.
I would say, if I fully understand your question, in that, like, yes, you can probably find local bacteria that have certain pigments, but it's again going to be where you either know what you're looking for or you discover a new pigmented bacteria. Because there's some that have already been discovered that are very abundant around the world, but then there's some that could be just in your backyard that's found nowhere else. As we're dealing with millions, if not billions and trillions of different organisms that you'll have to decipher and go through. So I would say yes.
It's like Julia Rose put underneath it that's a fascinating idea, regional bacterial color.
Yeah, I so want to do that here in Iceland, but that would be like maybe phase 3 after we do the next phase of our
Whoa,
research.
that's like you got your no glasses, you've got glasses, you've got like glasses in front of the glasses. You're just looking closer and closer at going
Yeah.
deeper in color. That's crazy. Let's see. Oh, Helen, come on. Helen's like, okay, when can we buy yarn? It's fine.
Well, also the director of the Textile Center was like, we're selling this yarn next year at the Icelandic Knit Fest. I'm like, okay, if you say so.
You're like, I'm on it.
Yeah. This was like day 2 after I showed her the first sample. I was like, she's
all
also
excited.
already.
Oh. It wasn't that easy. Okay, when you grow the bacteria in the dishes along with fiber or textiles, does the color come from the bacteria directly or from their secreted or excreted waste? And how do you process the textile or fiber afterwards?
So it does come from its excreted waste, and that builds up inside of the cells of the bacteria. So in like the liquid dyeing process with the extraction medium, you try to break the cells to open them up more to get it. But in the dish dyeing one, where you're like, after you've inoculated, you are trying to get it to essentially poop as much as you can inside of the dish. And in order to then stop it from growing and cultivating, you put it through another sterilization process where you autoclave it, and that kills the rest of the cells where they can no longer continue to colonize. So that's how you then treat it, and then you can still wash afterwards. We haven't done any wash tests ourselves, so I can't really speak towards that with my research, but otherwise I've seen people been able to wash it.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask a dumb question?
Yeah.
What is autoclave?
Autoclave is where you're putting it into what we use as a pressure cooker,
Okay.
and that gets it up to a high enough temperature where you sterilize it essentially.
Gotcha. That's what I remember when you were talking about the autoclave before with the pressure cooker image. Okay, got it. Thank you. All right. Well, we are really out of questions, but thanks, Suzanne. It's like, here comes another question. Oh no. You guys, come on now. Okay.
You can also email me if you have any more. Like
We still have time. It's just funny. There's like
Oh,
nothing.
okay.
Suddenly there's like 4 questions that came in. Because everybody's like, I'm going to ask, because Amy said, she asked a stupid question. So I want to ask my question I feel stupid about. How do you encourage bacteria to poop? Do you feed it lots?
Yeah. So it depends a little bit what the parent bacteria were fed to start with. So since we were using kind of 2 different parent dishes at one point, one that had been fed like glycerin to be like the sugar source, one that had been fed something slightly different. That's why I was also having a few issues when I was inoculating them to then have them grow, because it's just the food source you're giving them. And also like temperature, oxygen, humidity, like so many factors that we weren't really able to control in our little wet lab at the textile center, but over at BioPol, they were able to have like really sophisticated machinery, keep track of all that. But I would say temperature for sure is the main key.
Have you corresponded with Neri Oxman at MIT?
That rings a bell, but I haven't chatted with them.
Okay. It'll be in the chat, so you can look up the name after if you don't see it right.
Yeah.
And we'll take Julia Rose's question will be the last question. I need help understanding the difference to the fabric being, quote, dyed by the bacteria versus merely being stained.
That's something I'm personally still trying to understand fully, the difference. And I think the reason why it's considered dyed is because the bacteria's like pigment is like a chemical compound that intertwines in the textile versus and how it doesn't rinse out at all at any point. And rather than it being like stained like you have with like strawberry or tomato juice or things like that, where it fades much more quickly. That's my understanding right now. So sorry I couldn't give a better answer.
All right. Well, thank you, Alice. This is so interesting to hear how your research is going, and we'll check in kind of when you're wrapping it up so we can learn more about what your findings were and how you're progressing with it. Yeah.
Alice, I do have another question. So how long is this particular program? And then do you have another one ready to go after you're done with your findings from this research?
So we are currently wrapping up what started in April. We're just putting together our booklet, and we don't have any set date for when the next sort of research continues, as we just have to apply for another grant for more funding and stuff like that. But I'll be sticking around at least with the Icelandic Textile Center's team of doing bacteria dye research, and then definitely Jens, our amazing scientists over at BioPol, will be sticking around. So next steps TBD.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much. This is very inspiring. Just kind of like opened it up for us. That's really great.
Yeah, happy to share.
All right. So if everybody wants to unmute and say hello.
Hello.
Awesome.
We can clap for her if we want to.
Oh, yay.
Hey, Alice.
Thanks, Alice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Amy.
Bye.
Thanks.
Gratitude. Beautiful bacterial dyes.
Thank you.
Oh, amazing.
It was fascinating.
Yeah, really great.
Yeah.
I love the idea of getting purple.
Yeah. No, purple's a hard one to get. Kathy, did you want to stop the recording? Miss Hattori?
Do I want to? Yes, I'm going to hit that little button.
2 twin domes.